Hello, everyone. My name is Mitra Sadapur, and I'm the Education Director at Minnesota Opera. Thank you for joining us for Women Directors Speak, a conversation between directors and young women from Minnesota Opera's Youth Opera Training Program, Project Opera. As part of our celebration of Women's History Month, over the course of the next 90 minutes, our youth will lead a conversation with the directors both about their personal career journeys and the state of the field of opera direction. My thanks to the 6 directors who are joining us. We have an embarrassment of riches here today. When I reached out to all of them, I never imagined that they would all be interested and available to join us. So a warm welcome to Mary Birnbaum, Tara Faircloth, Rebecca Herman, Omer Ben Seadia, Keturah Stickann, and Arya Umezawa. The Project Opera singers will introduce each woman further when the conversation begins. So the Project Opera students joining us tonight have been selected for their leadership potential and their strong work in Project Opera. So Project Opera friends, can you give us a wave when I say your name so we know who you are? Katie Garner, Sophia Gaylord, MC Halsey, Alice O'Brien, Olivia Orton, Gracie Tilney Kemmer, or Gracie TK, Hannah Ray, and Valerie Wick. I'm proud of your work in Project Opera and your preparation for this amazing event. Now, I will turn it over to one of our senior leaders, Gracie, to begin the conversation. Gracie.
Hi, so I'm Gracie TK. Mitra just introduced me, so thank you. And my first question today is for Mary Birnbaum. And Ms. Birnbaum has like a crazy extensive directing history. She's directed shows all over the world. She is currently Associate Director of the Postgraduate Artist Diploma in Opera Studies program at Juilliard. She's taught acting for singers at Bard and in the Lindemann Young Artists program at the Metropolitan Opera. She's a graduate of Harvard herself, and she trained professionally in physical theater at l'École Jacques Lecoq in Paris, which is incredible. So, Ms. Birnbaum, you've obviously had an amazing amount of experience all over the world. So my question to you today is about, I guess, the different places you've directed, and if you have some of the countries being Taiwan, Central America, Australia, Israel, you've really been all over. So do you have a country you really enjoyed directing in, a country that was incredibly different from the United States? Any commentary on that?
Thanks, Gracie. That was such a sweet introduction. I loved that. That was so really beautifully generous of you. Um, so I think the coolest part about being an opera director is that music is the universal language. And when you travel to another place, your shorthand with the staff of the theater, the crew, the cast, everybody who's involved in the show, all of the musicians becomes really intimate right away, even if you don't speak the same language. So I'm not going to pick one of these places because it was all really exciting, but I am going to tell you 2 tiny illustrative stories. One is when I was directing in Costa Rica, habitually singers would come to rehearsal like 90 minutes late. And in New York City, where I'm from, that doesn't happen. That's just like somebody walks in late and you sort of stare at them, and then the stage manager gives them a talking to after the rehearsal. But in Costa Rica, they would come in and everyone would stop. We would all kiss them, double kiss on the cheek. We would have a coffee break. It was the most beautiful reminder that the thing that we're actually after is humanity. And I brought a lot of that back to New York with me. I tried to, at least. It was pretty crazy with all the schedules, but you try to bring that humanity into the rehearsal room whenever you can. So that was one thing that was really special. And then when I was in Taiwan, I was doing Otello, a semi-staged production, which meant we basically had less time to rehearse than usual. And but it same expectations. And the kids in the show were supposed to sort of go around Desdemona and give her flowers. There's a whole scene where that happens. And I said to the kids, who's your favorite celebrity? They said, celebrity? We don't watch TV. We don't have like, what do you mean? And finally, it turned out that SpongeBob was their favorite celebrity. So they treated Desdemona like she was SpongeBob. And that was like our big analogy for the scene, was like they were giving garlands of lilies and flowers to SpongeBob. But it was just the best part of traveling is like a best part of directing is traveling, and the best part of traveling is connecting with people. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was an incredible answer, and I was not expecting SpongeBob. All right, I think Alice has the next question.
Yeah, I'm Alice O'Brien, and I have the pleasure of talking to Arya Umezawa today. Arya is a director, a really good director. She recently completed. She is the co-founder of Amplified Opera and the independent opera company Opera 5, both of which work to make opera more inclusive and to bring new audiences to the art form. Arya developed anti-harassment programs such as Safe to Run, bystander intervention training for the rehearsal room with Opera McGill and the San Francisco Opera Center, and has worked with various companies across the country to implement these programs and change the culture of opera and opera creation for the better. And I can't wait to learn more from her today. My question is, how does society's perception of a singular creative genius impact directing environments, and how do those environments perpetuate systems of harassment where many people's voices aren't heard?
Alice, thank you so much for that. What an amazing, provocative question for sure to ask. I think just before I sort of launch into the genius discussion is really to talk about that last part of your question, which is like why I think this needs to change, which is that the truth is that I think our art form is fundamentally made better when everybody feels that they can bring their whole creative selves to every process in a way that is joyful and fearless. And I think there is a real value in holding our space for our creative processes to be bold and fearless. And so I think when we think about geniuses now, what we think about is a person who is so talented that it eclipses the talent of everyone around them. And that their presence on a production will fundamentally elevate the production or make it better in some way. And we believe that geniuses are rare. So we protect them. We protect both their egos and we protect them from the consequences of their actions should they abuse the power in the room that they have. And so I think that that is why it's really harmful for us to elevate geniuses above the room and protect them in this way. And I would offer that I think that geniuses are, and I think there's a lot of science and research to support this, but geniuses are talented individuals who have been given access to resources and opportunities. And so in that sense, geniuses have been built by us. And I think that because they are built by us, we can decide that we would like to invest our time, energy, resources, and opportunities into people who will hold themselves to a higher standard of governance than some geniuses in this industry currently are. And I might even venture to go one step further and say that my ideal world would be a place where we actually flatten the structure of the rehearsal room and elevate everyone and recognize them for the amazing contributions they make to this art form in a more equal way. So thank you for that amazing question, Alice.
Thank you for your amazing answer.
I think I'm next. Uh, I'm Katie Garner, and today I get to talk to Rebecca Herman, who is based in Austin but has directed and assistant directed at many companies around the US. She also is a creator of the opera company Local Opera Local Artists, or LOLA, and I'm really happy for the chance to talk with you. Um,
Thank you.
I one of the first projects that I found out about that you were involved in was La Femme Bohème. Am I saying that right? La Femme
Yep.
Bohème? All right, cool. Which is an all-female version of La Bohème. And I got so excited when I saw this because I didn't even know that there were things like that out there. I've always been really fascinated with the idea of queering these opera classics, since opera is this art form that's traditionally very unqueer. So reading about that was really exciting. Could you talk a bit about La Femme Bohème? Like, did the idea of a queer La Bohème come first, or a female La Bohème, or how did that sort of happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish that the origin story was slightly more like thoughtful than it was, but truthfully, my friend Liz, who's the co-founder of Lola, she's a singer in town, and she came to me one summer and said, Rebecca, I have this idea. Like, we have all of these amazing women singers in town, and they're not being utilized as much as they should be. What can we do about it? And she was like, but I already have the idea of what we should do about it. We should do a La Bohème, but just cast it with all women. And I was like, great. Like, what's the spin? How are we doing that? She's like, no, you figure that out. Tell me how much money you need to raise and I'll raise it. And I was like, oh, okay. So we hit on a very modest budget of $20,000, which was a lot of money for two people who've never really raised any money before. And then I just started thinking about what La Bohème means to me, and what the story could be if we cast it this way. And I think that, early on, it was obvious we weren't going to have enough money to, with makeup and all of the costumes, we could make these women look like traditionally men, whatever that means. But the minute that they open their mouths, we're going to hear them in a soprano treble register. And so why are we going to try to fool the audience? And there are so many non-binary and trans individuals in the world already that are finding families. And I think so much of La Bohème is about this group of friends that come together that you don't really know what their family stories are. They've found their own community. And so I started really thinking about that. And then with all of the amazing singers that we had, we started just thinking about, what their individual identities would be. Some of them were like our Rodolfo, really felt like sometimes Rodolfo was feeling more feminine and sometimes more masculine. So in different acts, we had different wigs or different ways to help tell that part of Rodolfo's story. And Marcello really was, I would say, casting it now, I would cast it differently than we cast it even 5 or 6 years ago. I would be looking for a trans mezzo to be playing Marcello today. But at the time, we had already cast all of these women and they were game to do these things. But that's kind of an evolution that has really, I have gone on a learning journey as well myself as we started doing this production. And it was really great, and audiences loved it. And we got a lot of different audiences than are the traditional audience to come take a chance on a production and see something that more represents themselves on stage, which was really great as well.
That's really cool. Thank you so much. I think Olivia is next.
Hi, I'm Olivia Orton, and I get to ask the amazing Keturah Stickann a question today. And my intro for her, she is a director and choreographer who helps bring new operas all across the globe. She was born and raised in the Midwest and had an early career as a classical and contemporary dancer. Her work has been seen in many operas, including If I Were You, the world premiere, As One, and Orpheus and Eurydice. She has also worked on the premieres of Moby Dick and It's a Wonderful Life. So, obviously, COVID has affected in theater traditional opera. So, you have thought outside the box and you have done 2 drive-in operas with the San Diego Opera. And I was wondering, with your production of La Boheme, did you experience any obstacles that you addressed for Barber of Seville, the opera? And
both that great introduction and for the question. I actually haven't, we haven't started rehearsing Barber of Seville yet. I leave in 2.5 weeks to go out to San Diego for Barber of Seville. And so, but Boheme is definitely in the bag. That was in October. And I think obstacles, yes. I think Boheme was it was entirely one gigantic obstacle. I had originally been, I wanted to say cast, but I originally hired to direct La Boheme when it was supposed to be in the theater before COVID was a thing. And once COVID became a thing, it was hard to make that pivot. And David Bennett, who is the general director, called me one day and said, we still want to do this show. What would you think about trying to cut it down to 90 minutes and putting it on an outdoor stage and have cars come and do it like a drive-in theater. And so I think that there was something sort of wonderful about the Boheme, because it was really fly by the seat of our pants, and all of us just got on weekly Zoom calls and tried to figure out, like, okay, if we're going to do it like this, how will we do it? And so it just, all these decisions were just sort of collectively made. And it had been so long since everybody had worked, and that's not just the singers, but tech crew, the design crew, just everybody had not been doing their job for so long, that I think everyone was incredibly game in a way that maybe isn't always the case when you have people, when you're coming into a company that is used to working and they work a certain way, and you as a director coming in as an outside person, and sometimes it's just hard to figure out what their fabric is and how to fit yourself into it. And because we were all doing this for the first time, and it was really strange and kind of out there, I think we all just felt we were all weaving it together at the same time. And that was a really exciting thing. And so Boheme was, for me, triumphant. And I think that I'm not alone in saying that when I talk to other people who were also involved. As far as Barber is concerned, though, Boheme had the advantage of being this experiment that we were all sort of diving into. And Barber, we all know what's happening now. We know what building a stage in a parking lot is. We know what we need to do with screens so that the whole audience can see what's happening on the stage. We know the pitfalls with the sound design. We know how windy and wet it is in that particular parking lot. All these things that for Boheme, we just sort of were like, oh, okay, whatever, and just sort of did. Barber is not a surprise. And so I would say Barber is easier on the planning side because we know what we're up against. And so in that way, Boheme was invaluable in giving me exactly what I needed to do. Like the first meeting we had about Barber, which was several months ago. So we were already on the ball about it. We just were like, okay, we need to do this. We did this. Have you called the sound guy yet? Have we talked to them about where we're putting the, it's like all the things we just had on a checklist. But on the other hand, the audience and the company are expecting something bigger and better and more put together and more finalized than what we did with Boheme. And so there's a little more stress in that regard. Barber is also a comedy, so it's a little bit harder to do in a socially distanced way. Barber is longer, so it's harder to cut down to 90 minutes or below. But what I'm hopeful for is that David Bennett, being the smart man that he is, hired the exact same team, the exact same design team, brought me back, brought brought all of the people who had worked on this before, including the people who built the stage, the people who did the video. All of the people are the same. And I think that was the smartest decision that could have been made, because now all of us, since we wove that show together with Bohem, have a common language. And so of all the things that we brought from Bohem, just being able to speak about this show the way we are was huge. And I think something that I'm not used to as an itinerant director, as a freelancer, of always having to fit myself into new groups as I move around. There's something just absolutely joyful about getting onto a Zoom call for a new show and having every face be exactly the same. That's very, very exciting. So
Thank you so much for that amazing answer. I think Valerie is next for a question.
Yeah. So I get the absolute pleasure of interviewing Miss Omer Ben Seadia tonight. And Omer is just a genius. Every production she does is absolutely sublime. One of her more, well, I hesitate to say recent because COVID and obviously like things haven't been as quick as they usually are. But one that I saw that really struck me on your website, Omer, was the Ariadne of Naxos, performed at the Cincinnati Opera in July of 2019. And that was just a gorgeous production. So my question is, you've been working with opera since you were 15. So what about opera do you think has really kept you inspired for so long? How do you transition from performing to directing?
I have to tell you guys, this is so moving hearing your introductions, that I think it's kind of overwhelming, I have to tell you guys. So thank you for all the work that you guys did on this. This year has made me think a lot about that question, like what makes me miss opera, long for opera, and like keep coming back. And I think that everyone's sort of touched on it a little bit. Every time you go to work on a new project, it's this whole new adventure, because you're learning a new opera, or you're coming back to a favorite that you've done before, and you're going to a new place around the world, and you're meeting new people, and there is so much excitement. There's so many different challenges. There's so many different things to be nervous about and things to be excited about. And so like it never gets boring, right? Because it's always new and interesting, and you learn something from it, and you're different because of it. Like I was saying before, like it's so much fun to go back to operas that you worked on before or that you saw before, and sort of do a little check with yourself and go, oh, where am I in life? Like looking at this opera, because I look at every opera differently every time I come to it, right? Because I'm a different person, because I'm evolving and changing and growing and all of these different things. For me, I wasn't really a performer like some of my other colleagues here were. I just really wanted to be Whitney Houston growing up. Like that's all I wanted to be. And I think it was in a way, it was like an easier thing to think of myself as, I know, as Whitney. No, but I mean like being a performer, because I think that's something that is, I don't know, it felt more glamorous. It felt more exciting. It felt like it would be more fun to have the focus on me. And then I realized that I had a lot to say about a lot of things, like about the world and about a lot of different aspects of it. And I felt like as a director, I could have the platform to say a lot more of those things at once. And I think I was always really concerned about that community of people coming together and sort of what a room would feel like. I think we've all had really bad experiences in a rehearsal room, and we've all had really good experiences. And I think that when I learned that I could actually like have a say in what the experience was like, whether it would be a positive experience or not, made me really empowered to feel like I could have a voice and I could have like a say about what my work looked like and what my world looked like. And that was really exciting to me. So now I'm like, I don't want to do anything else but this.
Thank you so much, Omer. That is such a wonderful, articulate answer. I believe Hannah is next.
Yeah, so I have the pleasure of talking with Ms. Tara Faircloth. And so she's a director, and she's just directed so many things. It's amazing how many things are on her website. And she received particular celebration for her direction of Le Nozze di Figaro. So your directorial debut of opera was in the Baroque music style. And so I was wondering what you thought about how different it is to direct in different music styles, and what is your favorite musical era to direct in?
Wow. Thanks, Hannah. Yes, you really took me to the Wayback Machine there. My very first opera was with the Baroque company. It was actually an oratorio, but we decided to stage it. It was Scarlatti's Cain, the First Murder. And honestly, I've never lost my love for Baroque music. I wouldn't say I would do it exclusively, but I would like to do it a lot more than I get to. I like the Baroque era, and including very early Baroque, Monteverdi, and a lot of more obscure French Baroque operas that don't get performed as often, really. I think a lot of times in America, we think Baroque, and that really takes us to Handel. And I like Handel, but he's not the only game in town for sure. I was really lucky as, unlike Omer, I was a performer, I was a singer, and I went to graduate school for singing. And I was in the last semester of my master's degree when my Baroque professor kind of conned me into directing a Baroque opera for our collegium group. And that was my introduction to directing. And I was like, what? Why have I been doing this the whole time? But anyway, so luckily, my friend, currently my friend, my professor at the time, he invited me to do quite a few operas with this Baroque company that he runs in Houston, very small. And basically, he gave me free reign to do whatever the heck I wanted to do. I didn't have a huge budget, so that was a fun challenge. But it, you know, really opened up, you know, when you're doing the modern world premiere of a piece, there's no other productions to go back and look at. There's nothing to compare them to. There's really you and your imagination and the music to figure out what the heck needs to happen on that stage. And honestly, yeah, I mean, naturally, I have a certain affinity for Baroque music to begin with. And it's funny because I think it's really similar to contemporary opera in all those ways. Like there's nothing to compare it to. It's a language that not everyone speaks exceptionally well, a musical language, and the limits for your creativity, there are none. The limit is none. So I would say that I still am quite attracted to the Baroque era. Especially I love Monteverdi, and like a little sidebar, sorry, I should have put this earlier, but a part of it is that because there aren't a lot of rules and traditions around what's happening, you can usually, you can also cut it and alter the story. Like one criticism of particularly like grand Baroque opera is that it's so long, and there are a million ABA arias, but you know, when you work with people that trust you, you don't have to do it that way. There's no police. And so that's part of the creative process, like crafting something that really is arresting for a modern audience today. So I really jive on this idea of connecting with an ancient form and making it something that we today are really jazzed about seeing. That's my story.
Thank you. I think Sophia is next.
Yeah, I have another question for Mary Birnbaum, who Gracie already gave a wonderful introduction to either earlier. One of the, as a teenager, and we hear our teenagers, these interviewees are teenagers. One of the biggest parts of our lives is deciding like schools and is school and going to school. And you've taught at and been a part of a few schools and programs. I was wondering, how do you think that the environments of schools that you've been to or taught at, or just programs that you've been in, have affected you as a director and as a part of productions?
It's such a cool question, Sophia, and I love it so much because all of you are in schools and all of us have been to schools. And I think school is a great place to get your love of the arts. If you're so lucky to have like a teacher who inspires you or some classmates who you can work with. And I know from talking to you and Gracie in the breakout room, just how that you both are really involved in your drama programs at your school, which has continued during this COVID time. So I think that a great director is a great teacher usually. And I think that a great teacher always learns more from their students than the students even know. So all of the work I've done at schools and everything, particularly my work at Juilliard, where my students are in their late 20s, early 30s, it really feels like a bunch of colleagues in a room trying to figure out a problem together. Not like, there's a great quote about teaching, which is a great teacher points at the moon while the student behind them looks at the moon, and they're both looking at the moon together. And where teaching gets confusing is when the finger gets mistaken for the moon. So that's what I try to do in all the classes. We try to look at the moon together. And I think that's what a great rehearsal process is too. So yeah, I think that's it. But basically, like, arts education is the best. We all know that. We know that it has to happen, and that to be in a room where you're wandering into the unknown, trusting other people, is the absolute that's like why we all do this, what we do, without a destined project or a financial obligation, which is when we start talking about shows and working for companies, it's sort of like taking all that stress off and just doing the ideal thing.
Yeah, thank you so much. I believe MC is next.
Yes, hello, I'm MC Hulse, and I'm going to be asking Tara Faircloth an interview question. So Tara Faircloth has been directing all sorts of operas for a long time. She's directed traditional operas like Madama Butterfly by Giacomo Puccini, and some non-traditional ones like The Bricklayer. I found that her production of Le Nozze di Figaro has gotten a lot of acclaim, so I'm going to ask her about that. How do you bring out the feminist tones in this?
Well, that's interesting. It's a great question, and I have to say, I don't think about that too heavily on the front end. I think I'm a feminist, so I bring my thoughts about the show, whatever show it may be, to the page, and I'm always looking for ways that the woman can be strong. I mean, let's face it, so many operas in the traditional repertory are not interested in women being strong. They're interested in women being tools and usually being killed. So I can't change the story sometimes I can change the story, but I can't often change the story. But what I can do is look for, where does the woman have agency? And I can also bring feminism to the rehearsal room, and I mean that in a loving way. I can, as my other wonderful directors have talked about, amplify voices that aren't always being heard, but making sure that we're not just, it's not just the director and the conductor spouting off about what they think it needs to be, but that we're hearing other ideas from ladies in the room. Figaro specifically, I think, you know, there are a billion readings. It's such a complicated, beautiful opera. It's actually one of my very favorites. And personally, I view it primarily as a love story about complicated people, a bunch of different love stories. And it's full of super duper strong women characters. And so I feel like it's my job to let us see how strong those ladies can be, but also that they're flawed, just like the men in the story. And just to explore the depth of humanity. I mean, to really bastardize Hillary Clinton's quote, I think, but, you know, women, the story of women is the story of humanity. So it's not necessarily a feminist take, but I think it's a humanist take, and thus it becomes a feminist take.
Thank you guys all so much for your incredible answers. Again, I'm pretty sure I can speak for all of us. We're in awe of your work, and we're in awe of your resumes, and you're all very impressive. So thank you. I think we're moving into questions that we came up with about careers as directors, which, like Mitra said at the beginning, was not something I had personally thought of. And I will not lie, I'm reconsidering a little bit. You guys are awesome, and this is so interesting. So I think the first question we have is basic, just what's a day in the life of a director look like without COVID, and then kind of how has that changed with the pandemic? And these questions are open to anyone, which I forgot to mention before. So whoever wants to answer it would be.
I mean, I can see, my mic is already off, so I can say that during normal times, for me, a regular day, if I'm in the middle of a show, usually means I get up really early to study. I like to really immerse myself in the material that I'm working on that day, and also to plan for the following day. The schedule is the bane of my life. And so making sure that I feel really prepared so that no time is wasted, and that I know exactly what I want to do. And then if I'm in charge of the schedule, usually we're rehearsing from like 10 to 2 and then 3 to 6 with the principals. And then I have the evening free, which I try to relax as much as possible. We're on the road usually, so I try to cook at home, or sometimes I go out to eat with a friend or by myself. It's a pretty monastic life for me during a show, until the show is staged. I am pretty much a monk. And then once the show is staged, life gets a whole lot better. It doesn't necessarily get easier, but I become much more relaxed and able to socialize a bit more. Other ladies?
Yeah, I'll agree with you, Tara, completely. That we have kind of the opposite schedule, in that I'm more of a night person than a morning person. So I will, yeah, that I rehearse usually 10 to 1, 2 to 5 if I have my druthers, unless it's a chorus staging. Chorus stagings are usually in the evening during a weekday, because a lot of choruses have day jobs. But yeah, I get up in the morning and try to have a good solid breakfast, and go rehearse for 6 hours with the cast, and then I come home, I make myself a dinner, and I sit down and I study for what I'm directing the next day. And that's what I do. And I try to go to bed early enough that I can do it all the next day without completely flattening myself. But it is absolutely a monastic life for those first week and a half, 2 weeks, whatever it is, until I put a cap on the end of that show, and I know the whole thing is staged. And then, yeah, then that first day where everything is staged and I know that we're just doing review, that's usually the first time that I might think about going out and having a drink with somebody. But yeah, up until that point, it's very, very focused. And then when I get into tech, it's essentially the same thing. Tech, except that it's not a 10 to 1, 2 to 5 thing. Tech, I get there much earlier than they need me there, which sometimes is good and sometimes is bad. But I like to be on site in case people have questions. I sit in the audience and do work on another show that's coming up, or I, just futz around until somebody wants me to look at something. We light the show, so I'm there maybe at 9 or 10 in the morning. And then we light the show during the day, or we're working on the set, or we're doing, tech rehearsals. And then there's a staging rehearsal in the evening, and I get home somewhere between 11 and midnight after a meeting. So those tech weeks are intense, but I have to say it's my absolute favorite part of the process. So as intense as it is, I'm also, generally speaking, unless things are going terribly wrong, I'm also generally in a pretty good mood. So, but that's what it usually looks like. Anybody else?
I'll give my opposite thing. Usually what ends up happening is that I study up until the rehearsal period, and then I can't look at the score anymore. I get, I don't know what it is, but as soon as it went from looking, I think there's a very studious part of what we do, which is all the research we do ahead of time and learning the score and the music and reading a lot about everything that has to do with the composer and the time period and all the stuff that we're doing. And then when I get to rehearsal, I am almost I can't look at it anymore, because all I want to do is focus on the people in the room. And so what I do is I direct while I run, which is something that happened to me on the road when I started directing in different places and sort of living out of a suitcase, as I picked up running as a thing to do that I could sort of do in any town. And so what I do in the morning is I get up and then I go for a run, and then I direct the scene that we're doing today or whatever we're working on as I'm running. And it's this thing about looking up for my score and being out in the world and getting surprised by something, and then going with that energy to rehearsal. But that's sort of the way that I'm so an afternoon evening. I love when rehearsal ends at 10 p.m. I'm that annoying person. But the later rehearsal is the better, so that I get myself up and into it. But I will say the thing that happened in terms of what a day looks like is that I think a lot of us, because we're freelancers and because we sort of work at home a lot, most of the work that we do is solitary, right? We prepare for something by ourselves. And in a way, I think we were very well equipped for being by ourselves during this time and sort of generating our own motivation and working by ourselves and figuring out how to do all these things by ourselves. So all of these I feel directing gives you a lot of great life skills for just being by yourself and being independent and figuring out how to do the stuff without having a lot of distractions, until you start to get itchy, because tech is the funnest thing to be in, and the long hours is actually secretly the best part of the rehearsal period. And the times that you're that little stretch at the end where everyone's giving it its last push is super energetic. So I feel we're well equipped for all this time.
That's awesome. Which I think actually goes perfectly into our next question. Olivia.
Okay, my question for everybody is, what are the most important skills for a director to have?
I'm gonna jump on this because I actually had an answer to the last question, which goes into this question as well. Gracie, please, you're doing a great job. Okay, so here's the answer, which Rich really dovetails, I think, with the scheduling thing, which is the ability to multitask and to find work where you didn't think there might be work. I think a lot of people, the the way that we just talked about the rehearsal day, that's really fantastic. But there's also parts of the year where you're not working on a show, and you really have to be in charge of your own time in a very proactive way to get everything done that you need to get done. And that includes like meetings with designers, and includes meetings with like composers and librettists, it includes meetings with producers to try to get your work out there, and to try to make sure that you have a show to go to next. Also, and I know a lot of the people on this phone call or in this Zoom call are real advocates of having a sort of a side job or a job that feeds in. And for me, that's been teaching for a while. And so like an average day of directing could be like, 2 hours of teaching here, 3 hours of rehearsal for this thing, 3 hours of rehearsal for this other thing, and not all spent in one place. And it just depends like where you are in a process and whether you're doing a show, what kind of scale you're doing shows at. So multitasking and hustling, I think, generating work.
I might offer too that building a tool set of ways to work with people with different working styles and different values is a huge asset. Like, not to rely on sort of one technique to try and get someone to a place, but have like a whole arsenal of things that you can draw from. Because you're managing like a lot of competing values and ideas and thoughts, and then your own thoughts and values and feelings on a piece when you're in the room. So if you have a lot of tools for managing people and bringing people to points of consensus and all of those things, I think you're pretty far ahead of the curve for sure.
I also think being really curious is a great tool to have. Always, oftentimes we're coming back to a show we've seen or done before. And so to be curious about, what can I bring? What do I see differently? What is new, or like what has changed, all of these things, or like, all like Omer was saying about all of the research that we do, like what more can I find out about Mozart or Da Ponte or like whoever, to like bring new insight or to bring something new to the story is just a really great place to always be coming to the work from.
Thank you so much for those amazing answers. I think the next question is coming from Hannah.
Yeah, my question is kind of what first made you want to direct, what sparked that interest, and then how did you get involved and enter into the directing industry?
Well, I'll start. I've been kind of been directing my whole life. Like I was a kid who would force my brothers into plays that I wrote and have them, we'd present them for my parents and my parents' friends. And I mean, I've been doing that since I was, 6 or 7 years old. And I went through a period of where I was dancing, where I thought I wanted to be a choreographer and a performer. And I did do that for a while, and I still do choreograph if it comes up, but slowly started watching directors. When I was dancing, I got a job dancing in operas in Chicago, and I just started watching the director and thinking like, I remember doing that as a young person and really thinking it was a direction I wanted to go into. And so I just started sort of hanging around and talking to directors. And when I retired from dancing and was thinking about what I wanted to do with my career, I asked a friend of mine about assisting. And so I started assisting directors, got some assisting gigs with opera. And I was specifically interested in opera because I was a dancer, and there's something about storytelling to music that feels very natural for me. And but I like the narrative form. The concert dance just wasn't my thing. And so it felt like an easy transition. And once I started doing it, I think I realized like this is what I should have been doing, for I should never have been doing anything else. Like, this is the thing. And so then it was just about getting my face in front of as many people as possible and meeting as many people as I could to just start making work wherever I could make it.
I think also Keturah brings up a really interesting thing that I wonder if people in the room have felt is you have to be a performer to be a director. That's a thing that I was told when I was younger. I don't know if you have all been told that, or if you think that the best directors are performers. Maybe you don't, and that's awesome. You can be a director right away. And once I figured that out, I was like, oh, I can? That's crazy. But it took a second of sort of like, well, I'll have to be an actor, and then I'll figure out how to get to the next level.
And I don't have to be old to be a director.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yes. I think I just want to jump in for 2 seconds because Mary, I think, yes, that's absolutely correct. That, I think, Rebecca, what you said, just curiosity. I think that is the core, regardless of whether you were a performer or whether you weren't a performer or whatever it is that wherever you're coming from, or what your age is, it doesn't matter. If your curiosity and your interest in the human condition, that's what is going to make you a director.
So, like, I think we're coming up on this thing, right, about like, what does a director look like? And I think that myth of like, whatever, that usually it's someone male, and usually it's someone white, and usually it's someone old. And I think we're all living proof of the fact that is complete nonsense, right? But there's definitely been this thing of like, oh, I have to wait until I'm a certain age to have the authority, or I have to be, I have to have had a certain, everyone always asked me when I was starting out, like, the interview, you guys are such better interviewers than like 99% of every like newspaper I've ever talked to or media I've ever talked to. One of my least favorite questions, people are like, how do you handle having the authority to be a director? Like, how, like, you're a young woman, how can you have the authority? And I'm like, actually, it's something about your nature. Like, Keturah, you're absolutely right. Like, when I was like 4 and 5, my cousins used to complain that I used to boss them all the time and like rearrange them in different like configurations. And my mom loves to say, like, when she comes to see me direct, she's like, oh, you're just getting paid for the thing that you always were. Like, now you just found a way to like have it as a profession. And I think, like, ultimately, instead of thinking of like directing as this big thing that I have to like implement myself into and like have to grow into, whatever, it's actually like an innate quality in you that you just have to keep nurturing and nourishing, right? And you kind of know that there is something in you that is interested in it, that's curious about it, that has that thing in it, and then just letting it be, letting it grow, whatever, and not thinking like, oh, I have to be this thing, this quantity that I have no ability to ever become, right? Who like feels that way? Who feels like they have that thing, right? This like itchy thing. So that's kind of all you need. The itchy thing. I don't know what I'm saying.
No, it made sense to me. I'm pretty sure it made sense to everybody else. I saw a lot of nodding. Thank you guys so much. Unfortunately, we do only have 25-ish minutes left. And that is awful because I do think we could talk to you guys for hours after this. I know we all have so many more questions, but we do have the part we've all been waiting for, the last section, being a female director in the opera world. We have questions regarding how that influences you, why you think it's awesome, why it's not so great. And I think Val is going to start us off with our first question there.
Yeah. Woo. Sorry, I got some echo. My bad. Yeah. Okay. So, obviously, growing up in a very patriarchal society, what we're taught affects the way that we lead. So how do you think growing up in this kind of society has affected the way that you lead? And what are some things that you've needed to unlearn?
I'm not sure if this is the whole answer, but I think one of the things that I still am working on is women especially always apologize for things and for taking up space and for having strong opinions. And so that is something that I think I've always had. I've always had strong opinions. I've always had things to say, and not trying to feel apologetic for it and just be in the room and be doing the thing has been one of the things that, you know, I have worked on, I'm much better at, but I still feel like I could do better.
I have one, and it sort of has to do with that awesome skill set that Aria was talking about before of like learning to manage personalities. There's also something that goes off inside you when you know that somebody's wrong right away in a rehearsal room, or they're saying something that's going to hurt someone. And to come right to the defense without any hesitation is something I've been trying to like fine tune in myself, because I think it should be a space of safety and protection, just like Aria was talking about earlier. But our natural, my natural place of being is a sort of a mediator and a person who wants to have the conversation. So sometimes you just have to disregard that and go right in and say, no, that's nicely, but there.
Mary, I'm gonna I hope I'm going to dovetail, I guess, with you into my reflection too. I have what my partner calls oppositional defiance disorder. So I never really, I mean, I think I started in as a director really because I was because I had stage fright. That was one component of it, but also because I was seeing a model of leadership that I just really felt was I had no patience for. I didn't think that people should be spoken to in the way that they were being spoken to in rehearsal rooms. I didn't think that I didn't like how conversation was being shut down in many of the spaces I was in as a singer. And so I think one thing that I've noticed about myself as I move through spaces is that I am a very disruptive presence in a sense, in the sense that I very much refuse to allow myself to perpetuate the same models of leadership that I have determined to be harmful, and that I'm disinterested in seeing in spaces. And as a result, because I think I threatened the status quo in a sense, I have been myself the target of people try to undermine me in various ways as a result. I think actually all of the amazing women on this panel are disruptive forces when they step into rooms because just they model a different way of leading. And I think something that I try to be very mindful of is I know that the simplest way to make that stop in a room would be to become the leader that people expect to see. And so something that I'm always trying to like find patience for in space, especially when I find myself to be on the receiving end of bullying behavior as a result of things, is just to sort of remember that that I am not interested in a figurehead woman leader who is still perpetuating the same harmful cycles. I think that I think the power of women in leadership and more matriarchal forms of leadership, if you will, is that we bring a different perspective, a different style of leadership. And that is something to be confident and strongly rooted, confident about and strongly rooted in. And so just, I guess my learning curve has been like, don't let people make you feel insecure about that. Yeah.
To speak again, Aria, I think what you say about like not falling into that like figurehead is so important. And I think like in opera, the art is so collaborative already. Like there are musicians, there are dancers, there are designers, there are singers. You know, there's so much happening that the collaborative spirit and really trying to get the best work and the best ideas from everyone is, I try to keep that as my goal. Like how can we bring their great ideas forward? How can we use those great ideas and come together with something at the end that is even bigger and better than like any one single piece of the puzzle.
Thank you all so much. That was awesome. All right. I think our next question is Katie.
Yeah. So we've talked a bit about things that you've needed to unlearn, but also are there things that have become superpowers? Like how has being a woman benefited you?
I don't know if it's specifically because I'm a woman or who knows, but I do think that I and many of my lady counterparts are specifically sensitive to what's going on in our performers' lives, what they're bringing into the room with them, not just what they're putting out on stage, but which has its pluses and minuses for sure. And I think one thing as a woman, I feel like or as me, that I have to unlearn is not taking on too much of their emotional baggage, and also not letting their emotional baggage become my emotional baggage. That's theirs to work out for themselves. But I do think caring about my performers in the room on a human level is, not something that everybody does, frankly. So maybe that's a bit of a superpower. Ooh.
Definitely. And I also think, you know, as a female-bodied person, as a person who has, like, identifies, and now as a pregnant woman, identifies with that aspect of my body, seeing characters like Violetta, seeing Mimi, seeing like big heroines in the sort of operatic tradition, and knowing or being understanding of their actual, maybe physically, what they were actually going through in a way that perhaps male counterparts might not be able to understand so well. I've seen male directors give sort of like physical line readings to female performers or female identified performers, and it's awkward. It's not, I think that our understanding of humanity is it's a different thing. And of course, like, being a trans woman, being a cis woman, like being any kind of shade of difference that you bring to the table in this case helps you know more people's experience. But I think my body is actually something that I think is kind of a superpower in a room. And again, for those reasons that Aria said, like the disruptive quality of that.
Thank you guys. I'm just like so overwhelmed. You keep answering our questions so eloquently, and they're really incredible and informative. MC, you want to get the next one?
So how did being a woman influence your entrance into the field?
I don't mean to keep talking, but my mic's off, so I'm done. Anyway, I think I'm the oldest lady director in the room, so I think that I was on the front edge of. It was still kind of crazy, the idea of hiring a woman when I started. Not that it's the most normal thing now, but there was a certain cachet, I think, in the early part of my career, which I certainly benefited from. And I frankly, I have no shame from that, because Lord knows my male counterparts had benefits galore before that time and still. But yeah, so I was very happy to be introduced as the first woman director at several opera companies. And, and then you have to perform. And there's a certain standard that people have expectations. Are you going to meet those expectations or not? So opening the door is just one part of it, but that's how being a woman influenced the beginning of my career. Ladies.
I'll tell you what happened for me is when I made this sort of like, okay, I'm doing it kind of a thing. I met, I was just out of school and I got accepted into a young artist program. And it just happened that year, all the women that were directing at San Francisco Opera were all women. And all of their assistants were women. And the head of the program was a woman. And it was, this also sort of relates to the superpower. There is a very strong connection between any woman who directs opera. Like there is something, I think the six of us are so different and so wonderfully unique. And yet there is something that I know that if I needed anything, any advice, any question, any rant, I could call any one of these women, whether or not we are friends, whether or not we know each other really well, or whether or not we just met. Like there is something about like seeing other women do it, seeing other women succeed and thrive in it, and also be able to, when I learned that I could just pick up the phone and go, what was your experience at this place? Or isn't this crazy? Or how are you handling this? Or just how are you doing? And not like just pretending like everything is amazing all the time, blah, 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 but like actually having real conversations about it, I think is something that was not only like instrumental for me to like do it, but to keep doing it, because the continuously doing it is also the hard part, right? But I don't know. I don't know what it's like over in on the guy's side, but like I find that that's like a really super unique thing that we just keep on doing for one another and like continuously doing for one another, which is I don't know, the only reason we can keep doing it, I think.
All right, I'm sorry to be moving so quickly, or maybe I'm not, learning to not apologize. But the next question, I think Sophia is gonna take.
Yeah, so the question is, do you guys have any specific examples where, like, while you were directing or really any time during an opera, where someone just came up to, was disrespectful to you and was disrespectful or was rude, that you'd like to share?
I have one overarching thing to say, but then Keturah, I know that you probably have a great one. I just think that I didn't know that people are generally disrespectful to directors. Like this is a thing that happens a lot. And so early on in my career, I would take things really personally and be like, oh, it's because I'm a young woman, or oh, it's because I'm a woman, or whatever and that may have been true, but it's important to know if you're going to be a director that people have authority issues and they get worked out on you a lot of the time. No matter what kind of leader you are, if you're the nicest person in the room, you will encounter some people who just don't want to even decide where they want to go on stage. You go, do you want to go stage left? You can go stage left, you can go stage right. And they're like, I can't do either of those things.
Upstage. I'm going upstage.
Yeah, I can't help you. Keturah, over to you. Sorry.
No, no, I was just going to say that, I mean, per the last question too, but it moves into a story that I really don't think that I even thought about myself being a woman director when I first started into this business. It didn't occur to me that there was any sort of strangeness in me trying to be a director in the first place. And I also was really lucky that some of my first experiences were as an assistant director at Glimmerglass Opera and at Central City Opera with Tara, actually, that all of the ADs that I was working with were women. And so I wasn't really aware that being a female director was at all a strange thing. And so, it was shocking to me that when I actually started moving from being an assistant into being a director, some of the very strange pushback that I ended up getting, and the one story that I will tell you This is at a company and with a person that I won't name because he is no longer working in the business. But I sat down to talk to him about just potentially I had AD'd there and wanted to, see what do I need to do to be considered a viable candidate to be a director at this company. And he said, well, I have to say that I'm just not sure. I feel like, that you may get very emotional in tech. I would just worry about you being incredibly emotional when things get really tough. And I said, so are you saying that I'm an emotional person? Or are you saying that women are emotional? Which one are you saying? And I started to get very agitated. And he said, well, see, here's what I'm saying. And he never really answered the question. He just was like, see, exactly, this is what I'm talking about. And I was like, oh, okay, so I see. So that was a particular like large example of someone sort of just pushing my buttons in exactly the wrong way. But and I do express my opinions. So that's part of who I am. But that happened a number of times in lesser ways. That was the most distinct. And it really was something that took me by surprise, that because I had never thought about my gender being something that had anything to do with whether or not I was qualified or ready or capable of being what I had set out to be.
I have one that I just think I was very proud of how I handled this one, mostly because I was like shockingly clever in the moment. But I once had someone in front of an entire cast tell me that they thought I reminded them of Alexis from Schitt's Creek. And I don't think they meant it as a compliment when they said it. I think they were trying to imply that I was ditzy, but without skipping a beat, I was like, thank you. I take that as a huge compliment because anybody who can escape the Yakuza in 6-inch heels is not to be trifled with. And just felt like real great about how quick that answer came out of my mouth. But I mean, that's one of my more hilarious, humorous ways of handling comments like that. There have certainly been ones that I think were a little more pointed and directed that have really shocked me. And I've come up with 2 strategies that I just like share widely. I use silence a lot. So someone will sometimes say something to me and I'll go, huh. And just keep nodding until they kind of like get awkward. Or my other strategy is if it's like really, really bad, oftentimes, for example, someone said, I'm half Japanese, and they said that I reminded them of a geisha once. And I didn't know what to do with that one. So I just, this is a strategy I've used multiple times. I just robot danced backwards and out of the situation because I didn't know how to respond to it. I was like, I don't know what to do here. So I'm just gonna like robot my way backwards and out so that I don't have to talk to this person anymore. So I like to use a very humorous approach to dealing with these things. I think that is just my coping strategy, but that I was like, ooh, Aria, that was quick on your feet with that Alexis comment on that one.
I think also to say it's okay to be angry when someone says something like that to you, and it's also okay to tell people that you're angry about it and to go through that process for yourself as a leader too, because I think there's another sort of burden of the figurehead, which is that you can't be touched and you really can't show any kind of emotion, just like Keturah was saying before. And so I would just encourage you, when you're all in positions of leadership, don't feel that extra stress of having to sort of not show anything.
Thank you guys again for the incredible answers, and everyone should go watch Schitt's Creek because it's fantastic. I think a lot of us will plug that. And then our final question for this section, Alice, take it away.
Yeah, I think we sort of touched on this a little bit with earlier questions, but what do female directors add to the opera industry that wouldn't be present if we weren't there?
I mean, this is maybe the really obvious answer, inarticulate answer, but just lived experience in a female presenting body is a huge one. And a little bit to go back to spring forward, you know, I was hired to direct a Giovanni and literally had someone say to me, but this was written a long time ago, so don't bring your modern feminist perspective into it. And like, I don't know how you do that. But so I think that, you know, just having had those experiences and knowing what it's like to be the not white man in the room, it is interesting perspective and always allows you to be more curious and allows you to put yourself into a number of other people's shoes, I think, easier. And that can be helpful both in how you are dealing with individuals in a rehearsal room, but also how you approach the text and the score and the work.
These stories also need revitalization and they need fresh takes, and exactly what Rebecca just mentioned and all of these fantastic directors have been talking about is how do you crack something open that has been performed a certain way for a long time and kind of explode it, and it's by having a different point of view on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think just in that question, I'd just like to make like a general call for more inclusivity in the industry and all different intersections in all different intersections of identity. I think that we are seeing the opera canon, or we have traditionally seen the operatic repertoire through a very specific lens, and it's very limiting, and it not really reflective of the breadth of human experience that is available to us. And the only way we can really get there is by opening it up and sharing the ideas with as many people as possible. So I think the answer to that question is the same thing that we're missing because we don't have very many trans directors or, you know, non-binary or any sort of intersection of identities out there. We just need more people, I think, in general, who find opera an inspiring medium to deal with. And I think we're made richer and more prismatic and more complex because, for that addition of voices.
That's incredible. Thank you guys again and again and again. We're all incredibly grateful that you've spoken to us today, and I think we've all learned a lot. I know I did. And so for our final question, it would be awesome if each of you could give us just a short little response to this. But what is your dream for opera in the future? What does it look like? What would you want from the medium and from the industry?
I'll start, I guess. I think Aria really spoke to it beautifully just a moment ago. Just more representation and a diversity of voices to be brought into the mix, both in kind of from production design to the singers on stage to also the stories that we're telling. More, you know, having opera companies that are commissioning works by new composers and librettists that are Black, that are Native American, that are Mexican, you know, that are anything, and have stories that are being pertinent to the audience today, as well as looking at the traditional works that, you know, have beautiful music that we love, and really having a critical eye about them. Are these still stories we want to tell? Are there new ways we can tell them that are more interesting, that maybe are more safe and more appropriate? So just more critical thought to what we are putting out there and what we are consuming.
Yeah, I would echo that, both what Aria and Rebecca said, as well as just, we have a great boom of new work being made in this country. And I speak a lot and work a lot with people who are creating new work, and I'm hopeful that American voices will start to emerge, and I want to see more non-European voices telling stories, so that it's in the operatic form, so that we just get a more something that reflects the demographic of this country and continent, versus just something that reflects white European ideals.
To hop on that and totally agree with both of you, and to say that I think opera at its core is music theater, and when we can look at it like that and then treat the places that have operas as community centers, and not actually as places where you go once a month, you go once a semester to see a show that you'll never think about again, but a place where you feel comfortable going to coffee or getting a book or having a discussion with somebody that doesn't just lead to yes I agree or no that where you're asking why. That I think is like the highest function of the possibility of opera in this country.
I think one thing that I'm really hoping for in the future of opera is that during this time we've had an enforced pause, and I hope that it has allowed us to take stock of what is important to us and to bring a freshness and a passion to the work. I think the state of arts in America is, it's troubled, and we have a lot of troubles to deal with in America, but I hope that there's a renewed interest in fostering the artistic community and what it means to make a living in the arts. And is that valuable? Is it essential or is it not essential? And how do we address making a living? Whether that means expanding our worldview to include, all of us do side hustles of one sort or another, but removing stigma from that idea. Anyway, I hope people will continue to, I hope there'll be a renewal and bringing passion to the stage, and not a rote sense of getting the job done, but a return. For me, at least, I'm looking for this, a remembrance that sharing our art is kind of a sacrament, and that's what I hope for.
I've just been basking in all of your answers, and I couldn't agree more. What I think I have to add to that, because I so co-sign all of those hopes, I hope also sort of flows into the audience side, which is the fact that I think opera has a lot to offer to a lot of people. And I am hoping to find a way where opera is accessible, opera is frequent, opera is just something that we treat like we do all the streaming stuff right now, or something that you can consume a lot of, have really informed opinions about, have really passionate opinions about, have really throwaway, silly, dumb opinions about, and is something that we can converse with everyone about, and not just like a select few that paid a lot of money and got dressed up and blah 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 to go see it, and then we never have conversations with them because we're only visiting in town. So having people go and see and have wild opinions and applaud and boo, or have really thoughtful conversations about, but also see themselves in it, so that it doesn't feel like a thing that they're visiting, but is just part of day to day. I think is something that I really hope we have is something that you could just go see all the time for not that much money, and then love it and hate it and whatever, trash it, or like have really in-depth conversations about, and see yourself in it and question it, and also like demand more of, and just have like these really great conversations. So like ultimately what I want to say to you guys, like whether or not you become like directors from this, which we all hope you do, but also like just being consumers of opera and just being like loving opera and continuing to like spread the word. I feel like such a missionary these days, but like going and talking and like being in love with it and being like curious about it and keeping like your interest in it is like, that's already a huge thing, regardless of what you choose to do with all this, right? But like just your love of it, I think will help keep spreading it apart. Sorry guys, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm still speaking English. This is a miracle in every aspect. But yes to all of those.
I think Omer, like amazing. I can barely stay up past like 10 p.m. these days. I can't believe you're still awake. I think actually I'm just very much in line with Omer. I think my hope for the future of opera is that anybody who feels inspired by opera has peaceful and equitable access to it as a vehicle of expression or entertainment or enjoyment. That anybody who wishes to engage with the medium feels that that is available to them and enriches their lives in whatever way that manifests itself. And my hope for opera is that the industry itself is filled with as many articulate, intelligent people as the ones who've been grilling us for the past 2 hours, because I think the industry is vibrant and bright with people like you in it. So thank you so much.
Wow. Again, thank you all for taking the time out of your day. Omer, thank you for talking to us at 4 in the morning there. I'm so sorry. But we're all gonna come off mute and do the classic like chaos opera Zoom goodbye, which is where we all woo and cheer at the same time. And you're all gonna do it. I'm looking at all my opera kids. We're gonna 3, 2, 1, come off of mute and clap for these wonderful directors. Woo! Woo! Woo!